Chapter 55. Looking at the blushing little magical beast, Dark couldn't help but wipe away the cold sweat on his forehead. That was close. It's great to have little magical beast. Dake quickly took out his notebook to record the effect. This flower card had obviously undergone a qualitative change, and based on the flower card's own strength, the effect should be more obvious than Pride Eye. For now, I'll record it as Bliss Eye. From the looks of it, it's at least the ultimate version of the Happy card. Just a trace of the mist is enough to make little magical beast fall into bliss and unable to extricate itself. But why was the apricot flower card successful, but the red plum flower card failed? Is it because of the different colors? That's a bit too idealistic. Dake wrote in his notebook, perhaps apricot flower is more compatible with bliss. Remember the URL, VIP can't you? 6. In order to prove this conclusion, he needed to do more experiments. But before that, he had to thoroughly study Bliss Eye. Dake took out Magical Beast, Ibu, from his card bag and summoned little Ibu. Squeak! Ibu tilted its head and looked at him. Dake couldn't bear to see it like this, but he still hardened his heart and gave the order. Ibu, whose intelligence had reached 2.5, couldn't help but show a hint of sadness, but it still jumped onto the table and pressed its paw on the pink flower card. A trace of mist leaked out from the flower card. Ibu squinted its eyes, its cheeks flushed, and its body swayed slightly. But it didn't faint from joy like little magical beast. After 2 more pats, there was no more mist coming from the flower card. Dake concluded that it was only the mist that leaked out when it was refined. So he first touched it with his magic pen, then touched it with his own hands, and finally held the flower card in his hand. A few minutes later, the little magical beast slowly woke up, but when it raised its head with difficulty, it saw that lowly Ibu lying softly in its master's arms, licking its master's fingers. Then it saw the pink card in its master's other hand. It closed its eyes and lay down like a corpse. Magical summoning. Dake activated Bliss Eye. For the first time. In an instant, a layer of faint light appeared on Bliss Eye. Pink petals suddenly swarmed out, but it was no longer the shape of an apricot flower, but a completely unfamiliar flower of bliss. The petals turned into a thin mist after coming into contact with the air. Following the instructions of the magic power, they pounced on the little demon beast that was pretending to be dead. Wow! The little fiendish beast screamed and was surrounded by the pink fog. Then, a small demonic beast appeared on top of Dark's head, panting for breath after that. He experimented with Ibu paste and finally got the results. Bliss Eye was much stronger than Pride Eye, but not as strong as Pride 2. The duration was around 15 minutes, longer than Pride Eye, and the cooldown was even shorter, only 30 minutes. Based on his initial estimation, this Bliss Eye should have reached the limit of 1 drop of great sin. In addition, after Ibu-chan returned to normal, her intelligence had increased to 3.0. The little fiendish beast, on the other hand, had no way of judging. Dake recorded all the data with satisfaction. He also paused the experiment. In the afternoon, he used the magic brain dropper to absorb another drop of pride. He tried to put the tip of the dropper next to the catgrass mouth, but the catgrass didn't seem to be interested in the dropper and refused to suck. Dake didn't want to waste it, so he injected the drop of pride back into the worm branch. Unexpectedly, the catgrass seemed to have smelled something fishy and pounced on it with a meow-meow sound. Then, the buds on its head began to grow at a speed visible to the naked eye. Dake observed and recorded at the same time. He was very happy. 17 minutes after the catgrass absorbed the drop of pride, the bud on its head stopped growing, but it had already grown into a small bud. In the afternoon of the weekend, Dake absorbed another drop of pride and injected it into the worm branch. As usual, the catgrass used its 2 meatballs to lie on the worm branch's head and sucked hard. The bud on its head grew bigger and bigger. Gradually, it grew to the point where it was about to bloom. Dake recorded the data excitedly. At this rate, it should be able to bloom with 1 more drop. 2 more drops and it might bear fruit. But after recording, he suddenly realized that he had used up all the pride he could draw this month. He suddenly became depressed. Meow. Meow meow meow. In the blink of an eye, it was Monday morning. After resting for 2.5 days, the little magisters once again immersed themselves in their busy study routine. In the first summoning class, Professor Shi Erfu finally began to teach one of the advanced summoning techniques: sacrificial summoning. The sacrificial summoning technique was a special summoning technique based on the extremely long summoning time of 4-star and above magic elves. Magic elven cards were divided according to star level. The first 3 stars were the first step, 4-star to 6-star were the second step, 7-star to 9-star were the third step, and 9-star and above were the fourth step. With each step, the summoning time and cooldown would increase by 1 level. The summoning time of the first 3 stars could be reduced to 3 seconds. To the 4th star it would take at least 1 minute. To the 7th star it would take at least 30 minutes. To the 9th star and above it would take at least 3 hours. Some magic elves would even need a few days and nights, or even a few months of continuous casting before they could be summoned. In the early days of magical engineering, even if the magisters had high-level magic elven cards, it was very difficult to summon them in a direct battle. Every time a high-level magic elven card was summoned, a large number of people would be needed to protect it. It wasn't until about 30 years ago that a special summoning technique came out of nowhere. Magisters sacrificed low-level magic spirits to summon high-level magic spirits, successfully shortening the summoning time. However, every sacrifice would cause irreparable damage to the low-level magic elf card. It was only in modern times that this technique was innovated. It no longer caused damage to low-level magic elven cards and further shortened the summoning time. It was officially named the sacrificial summoning technique. The core of the sacrificial summoning technique was the accumulation of star levels. Plus equals 4 all plus 4 all equals 4 all 4 all 4 all plus 4 all plus 4 all 4 all 4 equals 4 all 4 all 4 all. It had nothing to do with the number of cards, it was purely the accumulation of star levels. The necessary criteria was that in order to summon a 3rd-tier magic elven card, there had to be at least a 2nd-tier magic elven card among the sacrifices, and so on. Professor Shi Erfu gave a demonstration in class. He used a total of 15 seconds to summon a 6-star magic elven card, which shocked the little magisters. The sacrificial summoning technique and the normal summoning technique shared a cooldown. The shortest casting time and cooldown time were both 3 seconds. It was also at this time that Dake realized that his 8-second summoning time was far from enough. Don't be arrogant, don't be impatient. Just as he was skillfully taking a break, he suddenly noticed that something was wrong with White, who was also sitting in the last row. Is he holding a card and shining it at someone? Please recommend me. Chapter 56. Without debt to worry about, White seemed to have lost his soul. Although he said he wanted to change, finishing his homework was the best he could do. In this world, there was nothing more delicious than the magic chess. If there was one, it would be the taboo love, in his hand. White carefully aimed the card at the students in the front row. After 3 nights of continuous prayer, he finally received a revelation from the goddess. A drop of divine water fell from the sky, leveling up taboo love. As long as forbidden love was aimed at a person's head, the card would display the person's portrait and some of their attributes. Name. Rarity. Favorability. 1 second to remember https://m. Vipkanchu. VIP. Although White didn't discover any other uses, it was already interesting enough, wasn't it? White, what are you doing? Luo Boat whispered. White aimed forbidden love at Luo Boat and said proudly, a new toy. Name. Luo Boat Broheim. Rarity. R. Favorability. 80. White put forbidden love on the table. Look, Luo Boat, your rarity is R. Your favorability is 80. Luo Boat was confused. I know about the rarity, but what does R mean? And the favorability? White. I don't know what R means either, but most people aren't. You're special, Luo Boat. Really? Luo Boat laughed. Then the favorability, White whispered. Maybe it's because most of their favorability is below 50. Luo Boat, you really are my best friend. Luo Boat smiled confidently. He was especially confident about this. What about AI Ma? Have you tried taking pictures of AI Ma? White shook his head. It's too far and there's someone in the middle. AI Ma was sitting in the first row, so of course he couldn't take pictures. But White quickly thought of someone else. He couldn't help but look at the last row by the window. Luo Boat noticed his gaze and became interested. Want to try? White nodded. Help me keep an eye on Professor Shierfu. We'll try. Dake looked over and met his eyes. White quickly put down Forbidden Love and pretended to whisper to Luo Boat. After Dark turned his head away from them, Victor opened Forbidden Love and took a look at it. Name: Dake Dimming Rarity, R Affection, 45 White side. 45. I didn't expect Dake's affection to be higher than most people's. Luo Boat. Your parents are the twin swords of the kingdom. Maybe he wants to be friends with you. White. After a moment of silence, White suddenly noticed a golden symbol on the upper right corner of the card. He touched it, and a line of words appeared. 80 Affection unlocked. Ding ding ding. The summoning class came to an end with Professor Shierfu's scolding. Luo Boat, who was caught with his points deducted at the last minute, lowered his head. Dake glanced over, put his books in his bag, and prepared to go to the next class. It was said that after the Fantasy Beast class, Professor Kaiser would teach the students how to make magic elven cards that had a wide range of applications. Dake was very interested in this. And it seemed that most of the first-year students were interested as well. After all, to join the dueling club, one had to have 20 magic elven cards. If they could learn how to make magic elven cards, they would be able to get a full set of 20 magic elven cards in a relatively short time. Everyone loves duels. Dake couldn't help but quicken his pace. But halfway from the summoning class to the magic theory class, he suddenly noticed that someone was following him. Dake didn't reveal his intentions. He only walked a few steps after turning a corner, then turned around and waited. Then he saw White and Luo Boat suddenly bump into him. He dodged to the side. Luo Boat stopped in time, but White lost his footing and bumped into the wall. Ouch, it hurts just looking at it. Dake took the initiative to ask, "Why are you following me?" Luo Boat shrugged and laughed dryly. After a while, White rubbed his head and forced himself to say, "It's like this. Aren't our parents comrades? I just suddenly remembered that we haven't officially greeted each other even though we've been in school for more than a month." Dake frowned slightly, and a trace of vigilance flashed in his eyes. White's action was too sudden. If White had come to make friends with him when he first entered the school, Dake might have believed it. But as White said, they had been in school for more than a month. In more than a month, how many times had he entered the same classroom? Why didn't he come earlier or later, but now? Then he thought about White's strange behavior in class. Dake's mind turned, but he maintained his aristocratic demeanor and smiled. "Now we've greeted each other. I'm Dake Dimming, it's nice to meet you." White was inexplicably excited and quickly reached out to shake his hand. "White Gouda, it's nice to meet you too." "Really?" Dake smiled reservedly. "I'm going to the classroom to prepare now, we can talk later." White. "Okay." After Dake left, Luo Boat nudged White's arm and whispered, "How was it? How did it feel to shake hands with a genius?" "You don't say, it was pretty good," White said humorously. Then he picked up the taboo love that he had secretly taken a picture of, and his expression suddenly changed. Name: Dake Dimming Rarity, UR Favorability, 44. White was surprised. What's going on? Why did his favorability decrease instead of increasing? Luo Boat leaned over to take a closer look and hesitated. Is it because we disturbed him? Or did we make him angry by tailing him? White was distressed. Is that so? But we just wanted to say hello to him. Luo Boat. How about we give him a gift for Halloween? Receiving a gift will increase his favorability, right? White. That's a good idea, but what does he like? How about a toffee apple? Luo Boat shrugged. Maybe a set of magic chess would be good too. White. That's true, everyone likes magic chess. Luo Boat. Also, when are we going to take a picture of AI Ma? White was puzzled. Wait, Luo Boat, why do you care so much about AI Ma? AI Ma was mentioned in class. Luo Boat froze, then realized. No way, White. You don't think I'm a masochist, do you? I just want to see how low her favorability is for you. Don't you want to know? White opened his arms and shook his head fiercely. No, I don't want to know at all. Luo Boat. You do. White. Okay, I do. Begging for recommendation votes, votes, votes. Chapter 57. Around the corner. Dake Dimming didn't really leave. As soon as he left White and Luo Boat's field of vision, he stopped to listen. White and Luo Boat didn't lower their volume, so Dake clearly heard their conversation. I see, that flower card has a new function. It can spy on people's favorability. Wait, isn't this a feature of the main character of a dating game? It's presented in this way. So, he just wanted to increase my favorability. Is there some kind of reward? Or unlocking cinematics? Ha ha ha, it shouldn't be unlocking cinematics. Although it doesn't seem to be useful, I can't let him spy on my brain. In Harry Potter, there is a brain seal technique that can seal the brain to resist secret techniques such as mind capture. When practiced to a high level, one can even simulate false memories. There's no way this world doesn't have it. Dake continued to listen for a while. When he saw more people on the road, he quickly left. https://m. Vipkanshu. VP. The next class is Professor Kazayer's class. If the flower card making really has nothing to do with Professor Kazayer, maybe I can get some information from White. When Dake arrived at the magic introduction classroom, AI Ma Métis was already sitting in the front row. He smiled and sat in the last row by the window, waiting for White and Luo Boat to arrive. Based on White and Luo Boat's behavior, he had a guess. Even if White could obtain benefits by increasing favorability, it could only be from special people. For example, the main characters in the game. Come to think of it, Emma should be one of them. As expected, 5 or 6 minutes before class, Victor and Robert walked into the classroom through the front door, which was a rare occurrence. White purposely held the taboo love card in his hand. Even though he pretended to be casual, it was obvious that he used the card on AI Ma. White and Luo Boat then hurried to the other side of the last row. The two didn't have time to put down their backpacks as they looked at the card together. Name, AI Ma Metis Rarity, Sir Favorability. 31. Luo Boat was surprised. 31. White, it's the same as most people. Seems like AI Ma doesn't hate you as much as she seems. I want to know how much her favorability is towards me. Maybe she doesn't hate me as much. White looked at him and smiled awkwardly. Haha. However, he soon noticed that there was a lock on the surface of the card. Although it wasn't a golden lock like Dark's, it was still orange. He immediately stretched out his hand and touched it. Suddenly, a line of words appeared at the bottom. 80 favorability, unlocked. Is it because of the rarity? White immediately noticed the key. Dake's rarity is UR, so it's a gold lock. AI Ma's rarity is SSR, so it's an orange lock. Even though I don't know which one is rarer, there's no doubt it's related to the rarity. Robert also realized the crux of the matter, and his expression turned slightly ugly. So, there's no lock on my cards because... White quickly comforted him. Don't worry too much, Luo Boat. Let's look at other people like Professor Kazayer. Luo Boat's eyes lit up. Even AI Ma and Dake have locks, so the professors must have locks too. White whispered. Be gentle, we'll think of something when the professors come. My rarity is UR, and AI Ma's is SSR? Dake raised his pen and wrote a line of levels. NR or SSR UR. It's probably this type of level. It's closer to rarity than rarity. If 80 favorability unlocks a reward, then there should be a further reward unlocking condition. For example, 90 favorability and 100 favorability. As expected of a world derived from a dating game, it has all the elements. But favorability in the real world isn't as easy to raise as in the game. No, I didn't eat all of the melon from the last one. I have to eat more of this one. Even now, Dake still felt slightly happy when he thought about the melon he ate on Friday. That really relieved a lot of the fury that had accumulated in his heart. White Gouda, maybe it's a good happy fruit. Professor Kazair arrived at the classroom half a minute late. There was still a white bandage on his head. This made White and Luo Boat's plan to block him at the door completely fail. They could only hope that Professor Kazair would walk off the podium himself. But Professor Kazair wouldn't walk off the podium unless he gave out homework. The footstool on the podium explained the reason. In this class, Professor Kazair talked about the general method of making magic elf cards, and recommended a book called Magic Elf Card Creation, General Handbook, to the students. Most of the students listened very seriously. Dake was also very serious. This knowledge was very important for a magister, and there was a limit to what one could learn just by reading a textbook. Professor Kaiser mainly taught a kind of basic alchemy method, which gathered several alchemy circles and ended with alchemy circle number 1. As long as some materials such as potions, plant organs, teeth, hair, eyeballs, blood, and so on were thrown into the alchemy circle, the alchemy could begin. It was just that this creation method was very random. Before the creation, no one knew what the final product would be. Dake preferred to call it the random creation method. In comparison, in the Magic Elf Card Creation General Handbook that Professor Kazair mentioned, there was a detailed basic creation method. In that book, the creation method of magic elf cards was broken down according to race and attribute. In total, there were 15 races, 20 attributes, and 300 different basic creation methods. Very good, that's exactly what I need. Dake wrote down the name of the book and prepared to borrow it after class. After Professor Kazair finished this part, he gave the students some time to copy the notes on the board. Then he walked off the podium to see if the students were taking notes seriously. When he walked to Dake's side, he looked at the dense but neat notes, nodded slightly, and turned to the other side of the classroom. White and Luo Boat were on the other side. The two pretended to be taking notes. When the professor turned the corner and walked forward with his back facing them, White knew his chance had come. He immediately picked up Forbidden Love and pointed it at Professor Kazair. The next moment, boom! Taboo Love suddenly exploded with a pink mist, causing the card to tremble violently. White was shocked and quickly pressed down on the card. But Professor Kazair had already turned his head and stared at him with a deep frown. P.S. If you want a reward, will it still work after it's published? 731? The book has too many words, so it's hard to update before it's published. If it doesn't work, pretend I didn't ask. PS2, please recommend me. Chapter 58. Deduct 50 points from White Gouda. Come to my office after class. Professor Kazair's calm voice was mixed with anger. Everyone in the classroom couldn't help but stop writing. The sound of the pen rubbing against the paper disappeared in an instant. The entire classroom quieted down. Under such an atmosphere, White raised her head. Her face was pale and the corner of her mouth twitched. Humph! Professor Kazair took one last look at the Taboo Love and continued to walk forward. Keep copying. This was probably the first time he was angry since school started. As the most popular professor in the first year, Professor Kazair was always kind and amiable. His teaching style was also very interesting and not boring at all. Remember the website, Vipkanshu. 6. This made the students think that the hero's son must have made an unbearable mistake. The Night Institute students looked at him with a trace of pity. The Noble Institute students looked at him with ridicule and schadenfreude. Even Dake's mouth was half open. He didn't know whether to sympathize or laugh. Rage -1. In short, his anger subsided a lot. Dake turned his attention back to the notebook. As for this matter, he didn't need to think to know that White must have used the taboo love card to take a picture of the back of Professor Kazayer's head. Was the back of a professor's head that easy to take a picture of? Professor Kazel was the only surviving legendary-level great alchemist from Merlin's era. Even though he had become an archmage, it had only broadened his horizons and made him even more powerful. White actually used a card to peek into the thoughts of a magister of this level. Was he looking for death? Fortunately, Professor Kazayer had a good temper. If it was Professor Cheong-si with the giant bloodline, he would have slapped him. Cheap hands. After Dark finished copying the book on the blackboard, he intentionally or unintentionally glanced over. White looked very nervous, but she still carefully copied the blackboard with Luo Boat. Time passed by slowly. Finally, it was time to end the class. Professor Kazayer glanced at White, packed up his teaching materials, and walked out of the classroom. White couldn't help but lower her head and tidy up her textbook. Luo Boat couldn't help but ask, "What should we do?" White complained, "What else can we do? Go to the office." Luo Boat racked his brains and finally thought of something to comfort her. "Relax, White. Didn't the professor deduct 50 points from you? There shouldn't be any other punishments." Punishment of other natures. White jerked her head up. "You won't fire me, will you?" When he thought of this, Werther was abnormally terrified. As for his credits being deducted into the negatives, that was not a big deal at all. He received the Shang Malian Academy admission letter in the orphanage, and then the principal brought him to the academy. If he was expelled, he would have nowhere to go. Shang Malian Academy was his only home. No matter how Luo Boat comforted her, White didn't listen. He walked to Professor Kazayer's office and knocked on the door. "Come in." White turned the door handle and opened a crack. He carefully peeked inside. However, the first thing he saw was not an angry Professor Kazayer. Instead, it was Dake Dimming leaning on the sofa and sipping black tea. Dake saw White poking his head out and gave him a friendly smile. Then he pointed at the door with his teacup. When Victor realized this, he hurried into the office and closed the door behind him. Then he finally saw Professor Kazayer sitting behind the desk. Professor Kazayer's expression was calm. He wasn't as angry as he had imagined. In addition, Dirk, a student of the same grade, was there. This made Werner less nervous. He lowered his head and took a few steps forward. He came to the front of the desk and said, "Professor Duong." Werther shuddered violently. Dake put the teacup back on the coffee table. Of course, Dake couldn't teleport. However, White walked too slowly, which allowed him to get to the office first. Because it was a problem caused by the flower cards, Dake easily cut in. However, White arrived before he and Kazayer could talk much. Thus he sat down and started eating. Oh no, drinking tea. He was familiar with this office anyway. Professor Kazayer raised his head and tapped the desk with his fingertips. "Show me the magic card." Although White was reluctant, he still handed over Taboo Love. Under the threat of Professor Kazayer, Professor Kazayer took the card and frowned. "A flower card. You turned this flower card into a magic card." White bit the bullet and said, "Yes, Professor." Professor Kazayer took out a magic card from the drawer and swiped it on the desk. Suddenly, a cubic barrier surrounded Taboo Love. Then he raised the magic pen and pointed at Taboo Love. The magic power gathered into a beam and poured into Taboo Love through the barrier. White watched nervously. Dake also opened his eyes wide in curiosity. However, after Taboo Love came into contact with Professor Kazayer's magic power, it only trembled and a thin mist rose. Professor Kazayer frowned. "You've already bound it to you on a deeper level." Then he raised his head and looked at White. "What do you want to say?" White gritted his teeth and didn't say anything. Professor Kazair continued. According to the rules of the academy, even we professors don't have the right to pry into students' secrets, especially those related to the making of magic cards. However, if you're willing to, well, it seems like you're not willing. Professor Kazair waved his hand and removed the barrier. Then he pushed Taboo Love back to White and said seriously, I remember I said this when school started. There's no good or evil magic card, but there's a difference between good and evil users. Prying into other people's thoughts without their consent is a big taboo. I only deducted 50 points because it's your first offense. I hope you can take care of yourself. When White took back Taboo Love, his back was already wet with sweat. Under Professor Kazair's gaze, he reluctantly summoned up his courage and said, Professor, I'll remember your teachings. When White walked out of the office, Luo Boat quickly leaned on him. White closed the door and leaned on Luo Boat's body. Talking to Professor Kazair felt like there was a layer of invisible pressure that repeatedly crushed his willpower. There was only one thought in his mind now, and that was to never do it again. P.S. Update tomorrow's chapter after 12 o'clock in the evening and post a higher reward for it. It's better than a heart. So don't keep today's recommendation ticket. Chapter 59. After White left, Dake said to Professor Kazair, Professor, did you find anything? Professor Kazair shook his head. The magic card crafting technology has been developed to this day and is very mature. Even if you disassemble it violently, it's difficult to see through its essence. This is also why many magisters can sell new magic cards with peace of mind. Dake couldn't help but feel a little regretful after hearing this. But at the same time he also understood something. It was because of the anti-theft technology of the magic card that people were diligently researching and constantly forging ahead, which allowed the rapid development of magic engineering technology. Professor Kazair continued. However, I felt a very ancient aura from that flower card. It's very likely that it involves some power that I'm not familiar with. But since White Gouda is the son of the hero, he must have a gift from the hero. It's normal that I can't see through it. Dake's brain turned and he said the real purpose of his visit. So, Professor, how can we prevent this kind of magic card from peeping into one's mind? Professor Kazair picked up the magic pen and spun it in a circle. He smiled again. Dimming. It's not easy. Dake smiled and said, That's why I came to ask you, Professor. Professor Kazair waved his hand. Come here. Dake stood up and walked behind the desk, facing Professor Kazair. 1 second to remember https://m. Vipkanshu. Viper the professor looked him up and down and said, You are very talented, but sometimes it's not good to rush into success. Any magic engineering technology that involves the brain is very dangerous because human research on the brain is still at the level of experience. But if you really want to learn, I can teach you a kind of spiritual magic. Dake. Spiritual magic. Professor Kazair nodded. Yes. Now that magic engineering technology is widespread, ancient magic has been gradually forgotten in the dust of history. However, what we have to understand is that it doesn't necessarily mean that a technology that has been eliminated is not necessarily bad. Dake said, That's true. Just like history, we can always draw inspiration from the past. Professor Kazair was quite pleased. He said, You don't have any foundation in magic. Let's not talk about the overly complicated mental spells for now. I have a spell here that can resist the invasion of your mind by concentrating your mental power. Do you want to learn? Dake naturally nodded in agreement. The magic that Kazair taught was really very basic. It was called nether magic. It was said that it was a technique that mental sorcerers in the past used to condense mental power. After mastering this technology, he wouldn't be able to constantly defend himself against mind invasions like Professor Kazair. However, as long as he used this technology in advance, he would be able to temporarily defend himself. However, this technique was not easy to master. It required time and effort to learn it bit by bit. After Professor Kazair taught him the method of learning, he said, "I can help you experience the state of the underworld god when you use the underworld god technique." Dake knew that this was an opportunity and immediately asked seriously, "What do I need to do?" Professor Kazair nodded in satisfaction. "Just close your eyes." Dake immediately closed his eyes. Professor Kazair raised his hand. Light gathered on his fingertips, and he suddenly pointed between Dake's eyebrows. The light then spread out, rippling as if it were breathing. Dake suddenly felt that his brain was completely empty. There was nothing existed, except for an extremely small black spot in the middle. Once he focused his attention on this black spot, it was as if his entire soul was attracted to it. "Ah!" He suddenly screamed and opened his eyes. The professor asked concernedly, "How is it?" Dake said, "I feel that my entire mind is focused on this spot. There are no other thoughts." The professor said in satisfaction, "Yes, this is the state of the underworld god. Remember this feeling. It will help you grasp the underworld god technique faster." Dake immediately nodded in agreement. In fact, Lu Zhou's gains were much more than Professor Katzer had imagined. After experiencing it once, he immediately realized that this was also a technique that could assist in emotional control. This is much more effective than chanting the Prajna Paramitha Sutra. Even though it couldn't prevent sudden emotional outbursts, it could prevent continuous emotional outbursts. For example, when he was angry, he could use the underworld god technique to forcibly suppress the rising anger. As long as he dealt with it in time, he could prevent rage +1 from happening. There wouldn't be any more rage +2, rage +3, or rage +10. "Professor," Dake suddenly said. Professor Kazair looked over. "Yes." Dake thought carefully and said, "Actually, I specifically went to Traveler Street yesterday to ask the senior who gave me the flower cards about where they came from." Professor Kazair immediately became interested. "Who made them? Normal students can't make such delicate props." Dake thought for a moment and said, "The senior said that you gave them to me." Professor Kazair showed an obvious puzzled expression. "I gave them to you. Wait, someone pretended to be me. Then these flower cards probably hide something that I don't know about. Me see." Dake didn't expect Professor Kazair to be so quick-witted. With just one sentence he realized the problem. Professor Kazair quickly took out his flower card from his card bag. The flower card, decorated with green roses, emitted a faint glow under the light. The professor stretched out his hand and pressed it. The green roses floated out, and a slightly young and beautiful face appeared on the card. Dake just happened to see it and realized that it was a little fairy with butterfly wings. He didn't think much of it and just thought that it was Professor Kazair's old flame. Professor Kazair took out his tools and was about to violently dismantle the flower card, but he hesitated. After a while he put down his tools and said, "That's it for now. I'll discuss this with the other professors in the afternoon. Don't worry, leave it to us. Maybe this is just a prank." Dake replied, "I hope so." Then he sensed the atmosphere and left the office. On the way to the cafeteria, Dake thought about Professor Kazair's various reactions. He was sure that Professor Kazair couldn't be the creator of the flower cards. But he seemed to be hiding some secrets. And what role did White, who had forbidden love, play in this? Dake gradually became interested. However, he knew what it meant to only dabble in it. Too much exposure to this kind of thing could lead to emotional instability. Perhaps it was a better choice to be a heartless spectator. After he finished lunch, it was already 1 o'clock in the afternoon. He didn't forget to go to the library and borrow the Magical Elf Creation General Manual. Fortunately, it wasn't fully borrowed. Please recommend me. Chapter 60. The first class in the afternoon. Potionology. In the first 30 minutes of the class, Professor Thompson taught the students how to make the Mana Booster Potion. In the next hour, He taught them how to make the normal version of mana-restoring potion. White and Luo Boat made a lot of mistakes due to their restless state of mind, which made them a laughingstock. Dake, on the other hand, completed the potion in a very normal way. After getting Professor Thompson's permission, he taught the clumsy Deanna step by step. In terms of potionology, Deanna was not as meticulous as Luo C. Even though she was very patient, not all magic potions could be slow and meticulous. Most potions had a time limit to make. Once the time limit was exceeded, some of the processed ingredients would lose their effectiveness. In principle, Professor Thompson encouraged his students to help each other. Website: https://vipcanchu. VIP. Of course, if you didn't know how to make it and couldn't find a friend who could help you, then there was no other way. While Dake was teaching Deanna, he suddenly noticed that AI Ma, who was sitting in the front row, had a look of disdain on her face, but she actually started to help the students around her. It seemed that the weekend tea party had a big impact on her. At least she learned how to get along with people. After the potionology class ended, Dake didn't follow his usual habit of going straight to the library. Instead, he stayed in the classroom for a while, until he saw that White and Luo Boat chose to go to the Knights Academy Tower. He was a little disappointed and went to the library. Today, Professor Thompson gave him a thesis assignment related to mana-restoring potion. It would take at least an hour to finish it. After Dake found the information, he started to write his thesis. The difference between mana-restoring potion and mana-boosting potion was that the former could restore a large amount of mana slowly. If these two potions were to be refined into a magic card, it would be able to create a rechargeable magic card similar to AI Ma's Gold Coins X3. Dake added his own ideas and a decent thesis was completed. At the same time, he also started to consider whether he should add 1 or 2 rechargeable magic cards to his deck. Meanwhile, in the common room of the Knight Academy, after a long period of silence, White and Luo Boat, who had just finished a round of magic chess, cleaned up the chessboard. On the way to the library, Luo Boat couldn't help but ask, "White, are you really not going to use that flower card anymore?" White looked very disappointed. "What else can I do? Professor Kazair has already made it clear that if we get caught again, it won't be as simple as a 50-point deduction." Luo Boat turned his head and looked around. Seeing that there was no one around, he immediately said, "But didn't we use it very smoothly this morning?" As long as he didn't use it to provoke the professors, ordinary students wouldn't be able to detect it. Also, the lock on the card. "Speaking of locks," White suddenly said, "I realized that Dake Dimming is quite a nice person." Luo Boat was startled. "What's wrong?" "White, do you know who was in the office when I was scolded at noon?" Luo Boat, "Other than Professor Kazair, who else could it be?" "It wasn't just the professor." White sighed. "At the time, Dake was also in the office. If he wasn't there, I definitely wouldn't have been able to withstand the pressure from the professor. I think he must have deliberately gone to the office as a third party to ease the tension." Luo Boat was surprised. "Wait, White, why would you think that? Is Dake really that nice?" White shook his head. "Don't say that. We don't know him that well. Perhaps the greeting I took the initiative to do in the morning was really effective." Luo Boat, "But his favorability rating dropped." White, "Favorability fluctuates. It's only temporary." Luo Boat, "Why don't we check again? He's definitely in the library." White, "No, I won't use it again." Luo Boat, "But don't you want to know how much Panduola likes you?" White, "I." Under Luo Boat's questioning, White began to hesitate again. "If I only use it once, as long as I don't get caught. I used it so many times in the morning and no one noticed. As long as I don't use it on the professors." Luo Boat leaned over and said, "Just one more time." However, White came to the library with great determination. He found that Panduola wasn't there today. While he was disappointed, he also heaved a sigh of relief. However, His happy behavior made Luo Boat realize that his friend had fallen in love. Reading room. After Dake finished his potioneering thesis, he was ready to go back to his dorm to take care of the catmint and catmint. However, just as he was about to pack his things, he saw White and Luo Boat walking towards him. "Excuse me, can we sit here?" White pointed across from Dake. The table could seat 4 people. In the past, only Deanna and Luo C would sit across from Dake. Dark frowned imperceptibly, but he still said, "Of course." White and Luo Boat sat down one after another. Victor took out his homework and wanted to say a few more words to Dark to increase his favorability, but he found that Dark had already stood up. His face froze. However, Dake obviously wouldn't stop. He waited for Dake to leave. White suddenly realized that AI Ma was sitting across from him. He suddenly felt awkward. After leaving the library, Dake went straight back to his dorm. After taking care of the catmint and catmint, he immediately followed the method taught by Professor Kazair and began to practice the God of Underworld magic. However, just as Professor Kazair said to master the God of Underworld magic, he had to practice it over a long period of time. The best way was to practice it for an hour before going to sleep every day. Therefore, after half an hour of practice, Dake took out the Magic Elf Creation General Handbook and started to read it by himself. However, he only flipped through a small part of it. Dake put down the book and stood up. Today he felt a little uneasy. It was as if there was something he wanted to do, but he didn't do it. Meow. The catmint dragged its pot over and rubbed against his calf. He looked down at the cute catmint, especially the flower that was about to bloom on its head. A hint of understanding flashed in his eyes. "That's it. I haven't absorbed today's pride. Just 1 drop might be enough to make this flower bloom. But I've already used up this month's amount. If I continue to absorb, I'll have to take some risks. But if I only absorb 1 more drop..." Dake was in a dilemma similar to White's. "Please recommend me." Heartsuit. Chapter 61. Meow meow meow. Dake placed the catnip plant on his lap. He scratched its chin while carefully observing the bud on its head. Generally speaking, the catnip plant was also subconsciously protecting its bud, so it didn't cause any damage. Dake suppressed his desire for 1 more drop and tried to think of another topic. "If I don't increase pride, can I make the bud bloom through normal cultivation?" After all, autumn was the season for the catnip plant to bloom and bear fruit. With this in mind, Dake finally suppressed his impulse. Since the situation was still stable, there was no need to take such a risk. After all, the brain was the most complicated system in the human body. If there was an accident, it would cause irreparable damage. Dake relied on the self-control he had honed over the past month to stabilize his heart. However, he soon had a new idea. Even if he didn't wait for it to bloom and bear fruit, he could still experiment. Remember the URL, Vipkanshu. 6. Although the bud couldn't be moved, the catnip plant itself was a fleshy stem. The hair on its body was similar to the needles of a cactus. It couldn't absorb and convert pride to 100%. If a part of it leaked out, it was likely to spread to all parts of the body. So, was it possible to experiment with cat hair first? With this in mind, Dake flipped open the Magic Elf Creation General Manual and quickly found the bird and beast species, grass attribute, and plant species, grass attribute basic creation methods. At present, the catnip plant didn't show any other attributes. Based on its ecology, the catnip plant looked like a bird or beast species, but in essence, it was a plant species. So, for the time being, he would experiment with these 2 paths. He first made a copy of the 2 basic creation methods. First, it was convenient for him to use. Second, he wanted to familiarize himself with the memory. Then, he cut off 10 long hairs from the catnip plant near the crest on its head. He washed them with water, dried them, and pressed them into slices. After that, he locked the troublemaking catnip plant in the balcony. Everything was ready. Dake excitedly began his experiment. Professor Kazayer didn't assign any homework for this class, but it was just to give the students some buffer time. Next Monday's introduction to magic would be an experiment, so the students were required to bring their own materials such as hair, plant organs and so on. Of course, if the students were motivated, Professor Kazayer would not mind lending them the key to the laboratory. Dake didn't really need it at the moment. He had his own small laboratory. First he brewed the potion, then he processed the materials. Although the basic refining method had the word basic in it, it was actually much harder to create than the fantasy beast. The creation of an illusory beast only needed to be done step by step. Other than the fact that there were many steps, there wasn't much difficulty. However, the basic refinement method involved more refinement arrays, and they were all relatively complicated. Some of the refinement requirements were also very high, and the slightest mistake could lead to failure. In the entire refining process, as long as one step was wrong, it was very likely that they would have to start all over again. Fortunately, they were only using basic materials. The materials that Dake bought over the weekend could be put to good use. He first followed the steps to create a small bottle of elven honey. Elven honey was the foundation for cultivating a simulated life form. It was widely used in the refinement of magic elves. Almost all of the basic refinement methods used this special potion. In addition, brain lobe essence was also a very versatile potion. After that, Dake also brewed a bottle of brain lobe essence. The whole preparation process took half an hour. Basically, at least 2 portions of each potion and material were made. Dake never felt frustrated during the process of making the potions. He was always in a state of high spirits, so the potions he brewed also had a spirituality. Next, he took out a blank magic card and spread it flat on the table. First, he spread the elven honey evenly, then poured a drop of brain lobe essence. After it was slightly dried, he applied a layer of dark green plant essential oil, and sprinkled a grass-type attribute powder. The attribute powder was a type of regular powder that was divided into 20 types of attributes. Its production process was very complicated, and it was usually a finished product. Dake bought an entire set of attribute powder. After that, he needed to draw refinement array number 7. First, he needed to fuse this portion of materials with the blank magic card. This was the first big step. Took a total of 1 hour and 5 minutes. On Dake's desk, there was an additional semi-finished magic card with an extremely high degree of completion. This magic card's face was slightly green. It belonged to the plant species. Grass attribute. The last step. Dake took a light breath and picked up the magic pen. He changed the mercury axis to the chlorophyll potion, and began drawing refinement array number 1. This time it only took 14 seconds. The drawing of refinement array number 1 was completed. The moment the circuits were connected, the entire refinement array exploded with a faint green light. Dake carefully used a pair of tweezers to pick up a strand of catgrass fur and placed it on top of refinement array number 1. The fur was gradually engulfed by the green light. However, the light of refinement array number 1 did not increase. He considered for a moment and continued to put in the second strand, the third strand of cat fur. Finally, he put in all 10 strands of cat fur. The light grew a little stronger, but it became very unstable. Dake's eyes turned and he cut a little nail from his finger into it. In an instant, the green light exploded. All the materials were engulfed and the entire magic card turned into a green cocoon. Is this done? With a hint of doubt, Dake took out a 0.5 centimeter mercury knife. After injecting magic, he carefully cut open the entire green cocoon. During the process of cutting open the cocoon, green light constantly shot out from the gaps. However, when the entire cocoon was cut in half, that cocoon suddenly turned into a green slurry and collapsed. Could it be that it failed? Looking at the magic card soaked in the slurry, Dake took a pair of tweezers and picked it out. Then he placed it under the tap to rinse it. After rinsing it clean, He took it to the other side and examined it carefully. On the surface of the card, there was a puddle of green slime. Green slime. Dake could not help but think of a very common sewer creature. Card name, Trash Slime. Type, Elf card. Level, Race, Elemental. Attribute, Grass. Magic power, 100. Attack, 0. Defense, 0. Ultimate skill, Enhanced Gastric Acid. Enhanced Gastric Acid secretes enhanced gastric acid and quickly digests the material swallowed into the body. Ah, trash slime. Dake's hand trembled and he almost threw it away. So, is this considered a success or a failure? Both attack and defense are 0. Why don't you go die? After Dake recorded the data of the trash slime, he was not really disappointed. Since there was data showing, it meant that the crafting this time was a success. As for whether or not he could find a use for it from the trash, that was up to the sorcerer's ability. This scared me to death. I thought it would exceed 20,000 days. That's it. Smiley face. What's going on? Shouldn't it be 10,000 days? What the hell is 18,000? That's too much. Can it be changed from 5,000 to 10,000? Please, I'm so cute. Chapter 62. At least this trash slime. Even though it was called trash, it wasn't. Well, it was still trash. In short, it wasn't completely useless. With 0 attack and 0 defense, it didn't seem to be suitable for a duel, but the ultimate skill, Strength and Stomach Acid, could obviously be used to deal with trash. Instead of calling it trash slime, Dake was more willing to call it trash slime. Summoning. After summoning the trash slime using the usual summoning skill, Dake tried Pride Eye, Pride 2, and Bliss Eye. He found that perhaps because the brain structure of the trash slime was too simple, it didn't show the symptoms of pride and bliss. Moreover, its intelligence level didn't increase significantly. According to the usual rules, the standard intelligence level of a magic elf should be 2. 0, however, this trash slime's intelligence level seemed to be between 1, 0 and 2. 0, which was only slightly higher than a paramecium. It could understand commands, but its reaction was very slow. 1 second to remember. https:// Vipkanchu. Vape. It was as if there was a delay of more than 1,000 seconds. He didn't know if it was because there was a mistake during the refining process. However, when Dake thought about the cat hair and nails that he threw into the number 1 refining circle, he understood. Magic engineering was a new era technology that stood on the shoulders of alchemy, so it naturally inherited a certain degree of the principle of equivalence. As for the part that wasn't equivalent, mages often joked that it was stolen from the door of truth. In short, it was something like that. Next, Dake conducted another experiment according to the basic refining method of the bird and beast species. Grass attribute. In the end, the experiment was a complete failure, and the blank magic card was directly scrapped. He didn't know if it was because the bird and beast species didn't match the cat hair of the catgrass. In short, he summoned the trash slime and dealt with the remaining waste. In any case, tonight's harvest was quite good. It was really convenient to use the trash slime to deal with trash. He didn't have to take out the trash anymore. After organizing the experiment data, Dake decided to continue the experiment tomorrow night. Then he smiled and went to sleep. 10 o'clock sharp. In the Shangmalian, which lacked entertainment at night, students, especially first-year students, generally didn't sleep too late. The common room was almost empty at 9:30 at night. Most of them would move their entertainment location to their dorms instead of continuing to stay in the common room. The common room of the Night Academy. The candlestick on top of the decoration of crossed swords was still burning. It was the incandescent flame unique to magic candles. While it was bright enough, it also carried a trace of gentleness that did not hurt the eyes. In the corner of the common room, AI Ma was probably the type to return to the dorm last. She would always move from the library to the common room at about 9 o'clock. Perhaps this was the little girl's last bit of stubbornness. She actually did not want to completely disconnect herself from society. In this regard, Dake was completely different. When there was no one in the common room, Emma pouted, picked up her books, and walked up the stairs to the second floor. The male dorm room on the left and right, as although the corridors were interconnected, there were 2 stairs on the first floor, so the male and female students usually took one side. When Ai Ma left, the candle on the candlestick went out automatically. But not long after, the candle lit up again. Ai Ma, who had just walked to the second floor, suddenly noticed a flash of light downstairs. She couldn't help but feel a little curious. Who would come downstairs so late? Her curiosity was actually very strong. So, she quietly went downstairs and poked her head out of the staircase, just in time to see White coming out of the common room. White Gouda. Where is he going so late? Ima wanted to follow him. But then, she thought it was none of her business where he was going. So, Ai Ma returned to the dorm room with her books. However, at the opposite staircase, there was another person sneaking down. Luo Boat Broheim. After washing up, Luo Boat lay in bed for a long time, unable to sleep. He wanted to find White for another round. But this time he just happened to see White sneaking out of the dorm room. For a reason that he himself didn't know. Luo Boat didn't say anything. In fact, he had noticed more than once that White sneaked out at night. Every time he asked, White would stutter and change the topic. Luo Boat only knew that it was related to White's forbidden love. How can there be secrets between friends? It was different from Ai Ma. Luo Boat quietly followed him. The night passed quietly. The sun dispelled the darkness. Xing Molian soon came to early morning. Dake woke up from his sleep and suddenly had an idea. If I cover my face with garbage slime, will it suck away the dirt from my pores as well? It's like a mask. He first tested it with his palm and found that it was a little useful. Dake really covered his face with the garbage slime, leaving only his nose and mouth exposed. The garbage slime slowly wriggled on his face. Felt a little cold and a little itchy. But after 5 minutes, he took it off and suddenly felt refreshed. Ah! Dake watched as the dirt on the translucent garbage slime surface was transferred to a small nucleus inside, forming a small black dot. Then the garbage slime used enhanced stomach acid to quickly digest the black dot. Is this the so-called trash-free magic guide sprite? I love it. I love it. He washed his face again. Dake looked at his face in the mirror and felt that his pores had become thinner and his face had become smoother. Why hasn't anyone discovered such a useful magic guide sprite? Or is it that the other garbage slime is different from mine? He thought about going to the library at noon to look it up. Dake packed up his textbooks and left the dormitory. The little demon beast brought breakfast. Today there was even a copy of Great Sage Daily in the basket. Obviously, the halfling chefs loved the master of the demonic tamed beast. And they also liked dark. Dake read the newspaper and learned about the current affairs of the kingdom while eating sausages, eggs, and milkshakes. When he was almost done reading the newspaper, breakfast was also over. In the past, he would put the dishes directly into the basket and let the little demon beast bring it back. But in fact this was not very good. Today he finally had an automatic dishwasher. The garbage slime sauce quickly absorbed all the residue and milk stains on the dishes, and the whole set of tableware looked brand new. After the little demon beast brought the basket back, the halfling chefs were a little surprised. They all felt that the Valkyrie's son had grown a little. About 7:15. On the way to the dual classroom, Dake encountered White, who seemed to be looking for something in a panic. He was a little puzzled. But White ran a little faster, so he didn't chase after her. About 7:20. Suddenly, a scream came from the corner of the castle. Ah! A new day began with excitement. Chapter 63. Dake, who smelled the melon, was like a cat that smelled fish. He reacted almost immediately. Just as he was about to enter the classroom, he stopped, turned around, and walked towards the source of the scream. He didn't run in the hallway. Instead, he took out Magical Beast, Ibu, from his card bag. The school didn't allow summoning familiars in the hallways, but strangely, there were no restrictions on magical spirits. Of course, even if he did summon a familiar, not many people would care. It was just that the little devil wasn't by Dake's side at the moment. Magical summoning. The card glowed white, and little Ibu jumped out. When it landed, it had already materialized. Squeak! Go over there and take a look. If there's any danger, come back. Dake pointed at the source of the sound. The website was https://vipkanchu. VIP Ibu immediately understood and started running. At this time, there were already many students in the hallways leading to the classrooms. The people who noticed the screams quickly gathered around them. Although the Shangmalian school seemed to only have 4 schools and 4 classes in each grade, there were actually 6 grades. In total, there were 24 classes. There were 40 to 50 people in each class, and there were almost 1,000 students in one castle. It was quite a number. Usually, there were many forks in the castle, and the students were scattered, so it wasn't obvious. But now that something happened, many people squeezed together, and the hallway seemed to be crowded. Dake wasn't the one who ate the melon the fastest. Those who were closer had already arrived. Little Ibu stuck its head out and looked for a while. Suddenly it was picked up by someone. Squeak! Before it could turn its head, it was caught by something strange. I've never seen a familiar before. It's a magical spirit. Ibu wanted to resist, but it suddenly felt a terrifying aura. It was terrified. With a high IQ, it knew how to judge the situation. Thus, when dark finally arrived, he saw his family's magic guide sprite being carried by senior sister Pandora. He wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and raised the magic card. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Ibu-chan, who had been ravaged beyond recognition, hurriedly called for help. Dake ignored Panduola's gaze and kept Ibu back into the magic card. Then he pretended that nothing had happened and asked, "Senior, what happened?" Panduola glanced over and said, "It's nothing serious." It was indeed not a big deal. It was just a first-year student who was tied to a pole with a rope. The prankster had obviously shown mercy and had only tied him up. The screaming student was also found. There was a little girl from the aristocratic compound standing at the side. At this moment, she was surrounded by people and was clearly frightened. She reckoned that this was the first time in her life that this young miss had encountered such a sudden situation. Dake's expression changed slightly when he saw this. He then squeezed into the crowd and strode out. There were almost no first-year students around, so no one recognized the ugly girl who was tied to the pole and sleeping like a dead pig. It was Luo Boat Broheim. Even though they didn't know if she was under a spell, her features that belonged to Luo Boat were very obvious. Thinking about how White had appeared in the hallway early in the morning, she was undoubtedly looking for the missing Luo Boat. Dake didn't have any bad feelings towards Luo Boat. They were all classmates in the same classroom, so he would help if he could. Taking advantage of the fact that no one recognized Luo Boat's face, Dake quickly took off his jacket and covered her head. Luo Boat was still sleeping. Clearly, she had been fed a magic potion to knock her out, or she had been hit by a similar spell. Because the rope used to tie her up was in a dead knot, Dake spent a lot of effort to untie it. At this time, there were more first-year students in the crowd, but they all shrank back and watched. The upperclassmen seemed to think that this level of prank was rare and normal. The first-year students were a little timid. Besides, there were already people busy, right? "Do you need my help?" Panduola pointed at Luo Boat's head. Dake was in the middle of rolling up the rope. Hearing this, he immediately said, "No need." If Luo Boat woke up at this time, who knew what kind of trouble it would cause? Some people's IQ really couldn't be expected. It was more reliable to just send her to the infirmary. Fortunately, the infirmary wasn't far from here. After Panduola helped disperse the crowd, Dake smoothly arrived at the infirmary. The Shangmalian school doctor was a nun. It was said that she used to be a great nun under the direct command of the Holy Church, but because she violated the precepts, she was expelled and came to Shangmalian to work. As for what precepts she had violated, could only be said that there were different opinions. Is Sister Kalyen here? Dake pushed the door open and entered with Luo Boat. The door wasn't locked, but there didn't seem to be anyone inside. Dake had no choice but to move Luo Boat to the bed first. The infirmary didn't have the smell of medicine that was common in hospitals, and it was well ventilated, which made people feel comfortable. But for some reason, a long whip with a snake's mouth was hanging on the snow-white wall. The body of the whip looked like a row of fine scales, which made people feel a little uncomfortable. Morning. The white cloth of the bed next to the bed was suddenly lifted, and Sister Kalyen, whose hair was a little messy, poked her head out. Dake was startled and asked subconsciously, "May I ask who you are?" "I'm the school doctor you're looking for." Sister Kalyen slowly lifted the cloth curtain and walked out. She seemed to have just woken up, yawning from time to time. The white coat on her body was only buttoned in the middle, which made her look a little sloppy and casual. Dake quickly averted his gaze and marked the infirmary as a dangerous place in his heart. This school doctor was wrong. Very wrong. Since it was almost time for class, Dake said concisely, "This is my classmate, Luo Boat Broheim from the Night Academy. When I found him, he was tied to a pillar." "Yes, it's the good night potion." Sister Kalyen just sniffed and said, "It's nothing. He'll probably wake up after 2 more hours of sleep." Dake was puzzled. Is the good night potion the kind used to help people sleep? Sister Kalyen reached out to stroke the silver hair that hung down to the corner of her eyes and smiled. "Yes, it's like this. Every year, a few unlucky people who oversleep are sent here, and some of them are happy when they wake up." Dake. "Why?" Sister Kalyen. "You don't have to go to class and you won't lose points. Isn't that something to be happy about?" Dake. "No wonder you were expelled." Dake pointed at Luo Boat and said helplessly, "If that's the case, then it's fine. The problem lies somewhere else." Sister Kalyen. "What problem?" Dake. "He's a man." The settings were placed in works related, and it would slowly be added as the progress progressed. In addition, when more magic conduction cards appeared, he would also make an illustration handbook for them. Smiley face 3/Hia. Chapter 64. Ahem. Sister Kalyen coughed 3 times in a row to express her shock. She lowered her head and observed carefully. The girl lying on the hospital bed did look a little like a man, but she obviously did not have an Adam's apple. Her body was also quite well developed, and she was even precocious. If the student beside her had not pointed out her true gender, Sister Kalyen would never have guessed that she was a boy. "Are you sure?" She could not help but turn around and ask. Dake looked at her sympathetically and nodded. "Of course. There shouldn't be a Luo Boat twin among the first-year students, right? That's tricky." Sister Kalyen took a deep breath. In the past 2 years, even the most extreme prank was to turn people into pigs. I didn't expect that there would be something worse than that. Turn into a pig. Remember the website, Vipkanshu. 6-Day could not decide which was worse, being turned into a pig or being turned into the opposite sex. However, Sister Kalyen obviously felt that the latter was worse. However, if turning into a pig could be cured, turning into a woman should be a piece of cake, right? With this thought in mind, Dake asked, "Can it be cured?" Sister Kalyen took out a pair of wrinkled rubber gloves from her pocket and put them on. She said solemnly, "Gender transformation is a type of transformation. It has something in common with turning into a pig, a sheep, and a toad. In theory, they can't last long. Even if they are left alone, they will automatically disappear after a certain period of time. Of course, we can't make a judgment easily before the diagnosis is confirmed. Shierfu, it's not my responsibility to trace the source." "Professor." Shi-Erfu. A breeze blew. Dake turned around and saw Professor Shi-Erfu standing silently behind him. Naturally, the professors would not ignore such a thing. Professor Shi-Erfu said solemnly, "You go to class first. I've already informed Cheongsi." "Okay, Professor." Dake bowed and left the infirmary. Professional matters were naturally left to the professionals. He did not need to worry about what happened next. "Hey, Dimming." "Good morning, God." On the way to the classroom, Dake ran into White. White looked very dejected. Her face was drooping as she greeted them. He asked casually, "Dimming, have you seen Luo Boat? I mean Broheim." Dake said calmly, "If you're looking for Broheim, you can go to the infirmary. Of course, I don't recommend you to look for her now. After all, class is about to start." White immediately perked up. "Is it in the infirmary? Is he all right? She must be having diarrhea, right? It took me a while to find this brat." Dake had a strange look in his eyes. "Maybe. It was better to keep this kind of embarrassing matter a secret." "Then it's fine," White said. "By the way, Dimming. Hey, slow down. I'm exhausted. I haven't even had breakfast yet." When Dake arrived at the classroom, he found that the news of a girl being pranked had already spread. Fortunately, no one knew that the girl was Luo Boat. Otherwise, the little magisters would have already fallen out. The students didn't notice that Luo Boat was absent from class. Professor Cheong-si also came to the classroom as usual. She didn't say much and directly started the class. This class focused on the elemental suppression between magic fairies. There were a total of 20 elements. Only light and darkness existed independently from the other 18 elements. Every substance has both light and darkness. They don't have any conflicts with other elements. They only suppress each other. Of course, some ghost-type magic fairies hate light, but in fact, it's a biological suppression, not an energy suppression. The so-called restraint of energy attribute refers to a certain degree that is not linked to physics. The relationship between pure energy and victory is based on the conclusion of empirical science. For example, the ice dragon. Professor Cheong-si shrugged. Who knows why the ice element can suppress the dragon element? Because dragons are cold-blooded animals. This class was quite interesting. Professor Cheong-si frequently selected students to go on stage to summon their magic fairies for demonstrations. Caused quite a bit of fun. But when Professor Cheong-si asked the students to copy the elemental suppression table 10 times after class and memorize it for the next class, it became less interesting. Even after class, no one noticed that Luo Boat wasn't there. Ring, ring, ring. As soon as the bell rang, White rushed out of the classroom. Although Dake felt that Luo Boat probably didn't want White to visit him, he had no reason to stop her. The second class was arithmetic. Professor Li appeared at the back door and hooked his finger at Dake. Dake put down his textbook and left with the professor for the time being. The two went to a corner where no one was around. Professor Li patted Dake's shoulder with a gratified expression. "Well done, as expected of a student I've always thought highly of." "Dake." Professor Li was still excited. "I already heard that you handled it very well. Although Broheim is a troublesome kid, it would be too tragic if he had to carry a shadow since first grade. Now that no one knows his true identity, we'll treat the whole thing as a normal prank." Dake asked with concern. "Then what about the culprit? I mean, who did it?" Professor Li. "Broheim has already woken up. He said that he was suddenly knocked out when he was on a night trip last night. He didn't see anything." She changed the topic and said, "But you don't have to worry about this, the professors will take care of it. Also, Professor Kazair asked me to pass on a message. He said that the thing you asked for has been settled." "Oh yeah, what did you ask him for?" Dake's expression froze. After a while he said, "Nothing, it's just a small experiment." Professor Kazair didn't seem to tell the other professors about the flower cards. But if he didn't want anyone to know, why did he ask someone to pass on the message? Dake was still thinking when he returned to the classroom. Class was about to start. White came back in high spirits. Beside her was a recovered Luo boat. "Luo boat, I'm glad you're okay. I just ate something bad, don't be too loud." Dake glanced over and happened to make eye contact with Luo boat. Luo boat immediately put on a pleading expression. Dake secretly made a wow sign and winked. Luo boat nodded gratefully. White noticed that something was wrong. "Luo boat, what happened to you?" Luo boat: "It's nothing, just a mosquito bite on the corner of my eye." White: "Mosquito? Why didn't I get bitten?" Luo boat: "Maybe it's because my meat smells better." White: "Haha." During this class, Professor Li passed on the multiplication table that he got from Dake. Of course, there was multiplication in this world, but because education wasn't widespread, there wasn't a sinking system. Methods such as vertical and multiplication table that were convenient for beginners weren't invented. Anyway, after this class, Dake could hear the junior magisters reciting while he was walking. 1 by 1, 2 by 2, 2 by 2. Chapter 65. Luo boat, who had just suffered a loss, became very well behaved. Without Luo boat's incitement, White also stopped causing trouble. The afternoon of magic history passed peacefully as the junior magisters dozed off. After class, Dake didn't go to the library as usual. Instead, he went directly to Professor Kazayer's office. He hesitated for a moment but still knocked on the door. "Knock. Come in." Professor Kazayer's voice came from inside the office. Dake turned the doorknob and pushed the door open. Professor Kazayer was sitting behind the desk. There was a large pile of homework on the desk, but it obviously didn't belong to a first-year student. Dimming. "You've come just in time." Professor Kazayer put down his pen and jumped down from the high stool. Dake asked, "Professor, is there a result from the flower card research?" "That's right." Professor Kazayer opened the drawer, took out a flower card, and waved it in front of Dake. It was like a child showing off a new toy. Dake couldn't help but smile. He closed the door and quickly walked behind the desk. The professor handed him the card and said proudly, "Here, infuse it with magic and see." Dake picked it up and examined it carefully. This flower card wasn't the original green rose that Professor Kazayer had. It was another one that came from who knows where. "A student gave it to me," Professor Kazayer said humorously. Dake blinked. Professor Kazayer said helplessly, "Well, someone was secretly playing with it in class, so I confiscated it. Anyway, don't worry about its origin. This is something I carefully made last night." The flower card depicted a pink and purple butterfly orchid. It was an orchid with petals like a butterfly's wings. In the flower language it said, "I love you," and symbolized noble and elegant love. Dark injected a trace of magic into the card, and the butterfly orchid on the card turned into a vivid butterfly. It wasn't a butterfly orchid, but a butterfly. Pink and purple butterflies fluttered their wings and danced. Dake waved his card, and they seemed to be attracted to him, circling around his card. Specks of fluorescent pollen leaked from the tails of the butterflies, as if they were holding long tails. She was already so stunning during the day, not to mention the pitch-black night. Dake asked in surprise, "Professor, how did you do that?" Professor Kazayer smiled and said, "Just a little trick. This isn't a magic card. If you like it, you can take it. It has the same origin as the flower tiles, so perhaps it can guide you to the source. There are many secrets in the academy, and we encourage the students to explore them on their own. Of course, don't forget the midnight curfew." Dake left the office with a trace of doubt. Professor Kazayer's words didn't give him a good feeling. Could it be that he has already investigated and confirmed that there is no danger? Or perhaps the danger has already been dealt with? Otherwise, why would he mention the principle of encouraging the students to explore on their own? Dake put the butterfly orchid card into his card bag, knowing that he couldn't get any more information from Professor Kazayer. It seems that if I want to continue the investigation, The only thing left is white. The midnight curfew is a reminder. But Luo Boat has already paid the price for the night trip. Well, what should I do next? While thinking, Dake returned to the dormitory of the Aristocrats' Academy. He didn't want to think too much about it. After all, the hero's son was there. Dake even suspected that White had already gone deep inside. The taboo love card was the proof. Instead of taking the risk to go deep, it was better to wait for the secret to surface. Or he could step on the hero's footprints, bring a napkin, a knife and a fork, and enjoy the visual feast in a safe place. In short, tonight was definitely not a good time after what had just happened. He set up the experiment table and began tonight's experiment in advance. One trash slime card was enough. He didn't try the plant species, grass attribute. Instead, he followed the bird and beast species, grass attribute basic alchemy method for the second and third experiments. In the end, the 2 experiments ended in failure. But then he changed his way of thinking. He used the basic alchemy method described in the textbook, which was the so-called random alchemy method. The difficulty of the random alchemy method was relatively low, and the production rate was also relatively low. But when the mages couldn't find a direction, they would often use this method to find an idea. Experiments didn't only have to succeed to obtain data. Experiments that failed could also give people inspiration. It was still fairy honey and brain lobe essence. But the following materials were completely different. The random alchemy method felt like putting a large pile of materials into a large pot and cooking them all together. In the middle, a few special alchemy arrays were mixed in, and the leftovers after the cooking were all refined into the magic card. Because only the nature and requirements of some of the materials were specified and not precisely specified, and the requirements for quantity and time were also quite lax, a large number of random elements were included from the beginning of the refining. So, even if the same person used the same materials to make the magic card, it could be completely different. This was the random alchemy method, exclusive to the European king. After spending 32 minutes, Dake finally advanced to the final step of refining the magic fairy card. After he activated the number 1 refining array, he began to add things into it. First it was cat hair, then cat hair. Finally it was still cat hair. In order to ensure the purity of the core material, Dake didn't add any other materials other than cat hair. When the last cat hair was absorbed and swallowed, the light of the number 1 refining array slowly faded and finally returned to normal. Dake looked at the magic card on the table carefully. There was a thick layer of black glue on the card surface, giving off a kind of smell that was a little similar to a burnt smell. He picked up the magic pen and tapped lightly. Boom! A part of the glue suddenly exploded. A trace of flame sprang up and then immediately spread out. Dake's eyes were sharp and his hands were fast. He grabbed the fireproof cloth at the corner of the table and covered it. Bam bam! The fire was extinguished. Lifting the fireproof cloth and removing the glue, Dake used a pair of tweezers to clamp a corner of the magic card and carefully pulled it out. However, the surface of the magic card was pitch black. It was obviously a failure. Although it failed, I can see that it is of the fire attribute. But why is the fur of the cat grass of the fire attribute? Could it be the power of the sun? Pride the sun. See, there's a problem here. Dake suddenly understood. In his previous experiments, he had been using the basic refining method of the grass attribute. In fact, the light attribute that symbolized the sun was the most suitable for pride. After the cat grass absorbed pride, its attribute was already of the light attribute. Using cat hair to refine, he should use the 2 basic refining methods of plant species, light attribute, or bird species, light attribute. Yesterday's data, asterisk asterisk asterisk, asterisk asterisk asterisk. Chapter 66. The sky was getting dark, and the moon was rising from the west. Dake paused for a while to suck on the cat's fur, and then finished the dinner brought by the little devil beast. Only then did he begin the second round of experiment. This time, he first used the basic refining method of plant species, light attribute, to refine it. The result was not ideal. With the experience of making trash slime, he thought that the classification of plant species should be correct. But that did not seem to be the case. Perhaps the reason why trash slime could be refined was because his nails were the real core material. On the contrary, using the basic refining method of bird and beast species, light attribute, to refine it was unusually smooth. It was just that in the final step of filling in the core material, the cat's fur was obviously insufficient. No matter how many strands of cat's fur were thrown into the number 1 refining array, the light of the refining array was still dim. This phenomenon was written in the textbook. It was caused by the insufficient quality of the core material. First website. https://vipcanshu. VIP Dake immediately realized that bird and beast species, light attribute, should be the correct way to refine it, but only a little bit of pride's fur was not enough to support the completion of this magic card. It needed a higher quality core material. In other words, it was the fruit that was bred from the catgrass and pride. I finally confirmed the usage of the fruit. Dake was overjoyed. There was a lot of cat's fur, but there was only one fruit. All the previous failures were to welcome the final success. He picked up a pen and wrote in his notebook, bird and beast species light attribute fruit, pride. The experiment had come to an end. Now he only needed to wait for the beginning of next month. Dake placed a deck chair on the balcony, hugged the cat grass, and started reading The Outfit Changer as an entertainment book. He was actually not interested in the Outfit Changer card, but that was why he could read it without restraint. The opening of The Outfit Changer introduced the simple method of making the Outfit Changer card, and then it was all kinds of weird clothing designs. Dake even saw a set of clothing with an S embroidered on the front and AB embroidered on the back. In short, it was quite interesting. Time gradually passed. The moonlight was getting brighter. When Dake almost fell asleep, a purple butterfly with a long tail made of fluorescent light flew lightly across his field of vision. After a few seconds of delay, Dake suddenly became alert and straightened his body. Meow! The catnip grass let out a cry. Dake's eyes widened as he watched the pink and purple butterflies fly out of the room. Their long tails formed a bright galaxy with a hint of mystery and beauty. What happened? Dake scooped up the catnip plant and placed it on the recliner. He then quickly walked into the room and took out the butterfly orchid card from the card bag on the desk. Without any infusion of magic, the flower card activated on its own. Butterflies flew out of the card and danced around it. Dake looked up at the clock on the wall. 9:43. Under normal circumstances, he should already be preparing for his bedtime work. However, because he had invested too much energy into the experiment today, he ended up reading too many books. However, it wouldn't affect him much. Instead, because he had taken a short nap, he was now full of energy. He frowned and finally put on the school uniform jacket that was hanging on the hanger. He checked the card and put on the card bag. In fact, the origin of the flower card was related to the reduction of bliss. It was extremely important to him. I feel like if I don't do something, the melon will be cold. From Professor Kazayer's actions, it's obvious that he actually wants me to continue investigating. But he doesn't seem to want to do it himself. He's in a rather contradictory state of mind. Is there a reason why he can't make a choice? Should I trust him? Dake quickly walked to the door. However, when he opened the door, he suddenly thought of something. He turned back and took out the night dress mask from the drawer and put it in the card bag. Unknowingly, I already have 9 cards. It was almost 10 o'clock, and the common room of the aristocrat courtyard was empty. Dake walked down the stairs, and the magic lamp hanging on the wall automatically lit up. He didn't stay in the common room for long. Instead, he pushed the door open and went out. The golem guarding the tower was coiled up with its eyes closed. It didn't react at all. Dake quickly walked across the bridge and entered the castle. The Shangmalian castle was well connected, and there were golems patrolling every night. However, before midnight, the golems would only activate the warning function. After midnight, they would enter the guard mode. Once they found a student, they would arrest them. Therefore, midnight every day was the lockdown time for the entire castle. Dake took out the school card and summoned the little fiend beast. The little fiend beast sensed Dake's thoughts and couldn't help but reveal a trace of excitement. The boring school life had been suppressing its nature. It was a little fiend beast that was destined to stand above the sky in the future. The night was its domain. Above the night sky, there was its throne. Come here. Woo-woo. Dake looked at the little fiend beast with a dark expression and said helplessly, "Do you still remember the path when we followed White? Take me there." The little fiend beast immediately regained its calm and quickly patted its face. "Course I remember. Who am I?" Dake smiled. "Then hurry up." The night was indeed a good environment. He always felt that the emotions that had been suppressed until now seemed to have found an outlet and were flowing out little by little. He waved his hand, and the butterflies followed his guidance and formed a ribbon. Professor Kazair said that this flower card would lead him to the source, but in fact, they were just flying around the card aimlessly. Dake guessed that it was because of the distance. Fortunately, he had followed White for a while before and could get closer. Therefore, he quickly moved with the little fiend beast. First, he came to the windowsill of the Plenilune Serpent, then went to the next floor, passed through the external bridge, and entered another area of the castle. While paying attention to avoiding the golems, he continued to move forward. After about 10 minutes, Dake finally found the statue of the Grand Magus that he used to hide last time. It was also here that the butterflies suddenly reacted and flew in a specific direction. Here it comes. Dake realized that he was in range. Last time, the little fiendish magical beast had lost Victor not far in front of him. Thinking that this was a game world derived from Harry Potter, it was impossible for there not to be a secret passage in the castle. White must have used the secret passage to avoid being tracked by the little fiend beast. Dake followed all the way until the butterflies stuck to a wall and stopped flying. He realized that his destination should be somewhere within the wall. In this direction. Dake narrowed his eyes and quickly explored the wall. As a trace of magic power was injected, his fingers suddenly sank into the wall. After a moment of fright, Dake immediately commanded the little fiend beast to take the lead and dive in. But the butterflies swarmed in before the little fiend beast. Suddenly, there was the sound of footsteps behind his ears. Dake's expression changed slightly. He grabbed the little fiend beast and pressed it into the wall, and then he went in as well. Heartsuit Friday between 10 and 11 a.m., looking for monthly tickets and subscriptions. Heartsuit also attached is a math problem. Bird beast type light attribute, strength, plus cat grass fruit, pride equals. Chapter 67. Did I hear it wrong? 10 seconds later, Professor Shi Erfu appeared in the corridor and looked at the surrounding walls hesitantly. Then Professor Didi also flew over and said, "Why don't we go over there and take a look? I feel that something is wrong. Kids these days are getting more and more difficult to deal with." Professor Shi Erfu nodded and said, "Times have changed. We didn't even have time to study back then. How could we have time for night trips?" They were only separated by a wall. Dake calmed himself down and waited for Professor Shi Erfu and Professor Didi to leave. Only then did he let go of the little fiend in his hand. The little fiend was pressed down by him and couldn't breathe for a long time. At this time, it quickly took a deep breath as if it had come back to life. "The free air is so good." Dake's face darkened. "You're just a familiar. Do you have to be like this?" The little fiend lowered its head and muttered, "So what if I'm a familiar? Do I not have the right to breathe?" Dake didn't bother with it. "Go explore the way." "All right." "Oh." The little fiend immediately lowered its head and flew forward. Dake took out his magic pen and drew as he walked, leaving his magic mark on the wall. The butterfly formed by the card obviously didn't have intelligence and didn't know how to choose a path. It could only be used as a pointer. If it blindly followed it, it would only run into the wall. Dake was glad that he had brought a shoulder bag with him when he went out. The necessary tools were in it. It was just that his spatial imagination wasn't enough to draw a map out of thin air. The torches on both sides of the secret passage lit up continuously, gradually illuminating the path ahead. Dake walked forward. Whenever he took a turn, he would turn back and turn into another fork. Over and over again. He walked in the maze-like secret passage for more than half an hour. Inevitably, his senses were gradually confused and he couldn't distinguish between north, south, east and west. Just as he was feeling vaguely irritated, a voice suddenly came from the other side of the wall. "Squid, didn't you go overboard last night?" "No way. Pufferfish. If you can't even accept this, it's better for you to leave the church as soon as possible. I know this is just a rehearsal, but..." "No buts. Look at your fat chin and soft belly. No one said, but to you when you were born." "Squid, you've gone too far. I'm just stating facts." "Fine, I can't out-talk you. What should we do next?" "Hide well. Don't let the professors find you." As the voices gradually faded away, Dake whispered, "How cautious." They actually called each other by the name of seafood. It seems that it was Mr. Squid who turned Luo Boat into a woman last night. After that, he rested for a while on the spot before continuing to move forward while sticking close to the wall. Finally, he found the route to the other side of the wall. According to the direction that the squid and pufferfish had left in, Dake was on the right path. From the reactions of the butterflies, he could tell that the final destination was not far away. Therefore, he slowed down his pace. No one knew how many people there were in the so-called church. If there were still people inside, he needed to be mentally prepared to make a move at any time. But he seemed to be quite lucky. Until he entered the small temple, he did not encounter anyone. No one. Dake immediately turned around and retreated. He leaned against the wall and looked inside. But the butterflies that were becoming more and more active flew inside uncontrollably. He cursed in his heart. Then, he saw that behind the statue in the temple, the reflection that had just appeared shook and shrank back. This reaction. Dake was instantly amused. The person hiding behind seemed to be worried about being discovered. This made Dake immediately realize that it was also an intruder. Should I tease it a little? This thought flashed through his mind. Of course, he did not really do that. The main reason was that the butterflies had already flown to the surroundings of the statue. They landed and flew up from various parts of the statue as if they were collecting honey. The statue, as delicate as white jade, emitted a soft white light. Every time the butterflies landed, they would pick up a spot of light. But the spots of light did not last long. They turned into stardust in the air and melted into the air. The person hiding behind the statue was clearly affected by the butterflies. He could faintly hear some rustling sounds. It seemed that he could not help but drive away the approaching butterflies. Dake had some guesses in his heart. He took out the night mask from his card bag. Magic summoning. Faint light flashed. The school uniform he was wearing had been replaced with that cheap formal attire. Black suit, top hat, white glasses, crimson cloak, white gloves, and a blood-red rose. Excluding the cheap feeling of the suit's material, it could be considered a standard gentleman's suit. But Dake touched his cheeks. He felt that it was too much to call himself a mask, just by wearing a pair of glasses. But for the time being, he could not find anything to cover his face with. At the same time, the person hiding behind the statue might have been annoyed by the butterflies. Or maybe he realized that Dake was also an intruder. Of course, it was also possible that he felt that he had been discovered. Anyways, his movements of driving away the butterflies suddenly became louder. Following that, An abnormally strong light suddenly lit up behind the statue. All the butterflies that were flying around the statue were annihilated without exception. Crack! Dake took out the butterfly orchid card and found that there was a fatal crack in the center of the flower card. I didn't expect that the professor didn't lie to me. This is really just a small toy. Dake found that he had finally found the truth in the professor's words. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. If it was a regular magic elf card, it would not be destroyed directly because of the destruction of the magic elf. Stop hiding. Come out. White Gouda walked out from behind the statue, followed by a majestic stag. Dake took a glance and almost burst out laughing. Victor had also used a disguise card, and it was a full-body Cayman rider suit. It was Lion's self-made, crude Beelzebub's fly suit. He wondered if it was a pyramid scheme. In short, White in the fly suit looked like a large fly with a big compound eye mask on his face. However, if one were to disregard the appearance and just look at the function of concealing one's identity, this fly suit would be much more useful than Dark's evening dress mask. But why did you summon the iconic white stag when you had changed your outfit? No, I can't laugh anymore. I must learn from this and never make the same mistake as him. Dark started running without a second thought. He only left a coquettish back to the hero's son who had finally mustered up his courage. But the hero's son seemed to have been frustrated for too long. Seeing that someone was running away without a fight, he actually chased after him. Chapter 68. Hey, do you think I'll let you catch me? The difference in strength between the two sides was evident as early as when they were running laps. Dake didn't panic at all as he ran in front. From time to time, he would turn a corner and sneak a glance at the gradually panting White. But White wasn't stupid. Seeing the difference in leg strength, he finally remembered his stag. A moment later, White climbed onto the stag's back, enduring the load between his legs as the stag ran. His sharp eyes pierced through the fly's compound eyes, as if he wanted to ruthlessly pierce the back of the person in front of him. But Dake, who was running in front, flashed again and disappeared at the turn. From the moment White climbed onto the stag, Dake knew that the race was over. The magic elf's existence for a long time required continuous magic power consumption. But the magic talent of the hero's son was enough to support him for an entire night. 1 second to remember. https://vipcanshu. VIP. Just by relying on the turn, he might be able to temporarily increase the distance, but it would be very difficult to shake him off. Since that was the case, he would counterattack. At the 8th second, the trash slime appeared in his hand. After another turn, Ivan began to run in front of him. At the next turn, the pride emblem appeared on Ivan's forehead. It suddenly sped up and disappeared in front of him like a flash of lightning. And White Gouda finally saw Dake's back again. He continued to pour his magic power into the stag's body, and a flower card appeared in his hand. Forbidden love. The distance between the two sides quickly closed. Just as White's lips curled up slightly, thinking that he was about to catch up, the person in front of him suddenly took off his tall hat and threw it back. The pitch-black hat spun in the air and quickly crashed into him due to the stag's high speed. White didn't have time to react, but the stag suddenly stopped and turned right, helping him narrowly avoid the oncoming hat. But then, a puddle of green mucus-like substance appeared from behind the top hat and slapped his face. The moment his vision was blocked, White's heart was suddenly filled with fear. However, everything happened so suddenly. He only vaguely saw a petite shadow flash through the air, and then the stag that he was so proud of screamed and was instantly destroyed without any resistance. Then, the green mucus on his face suddenly disappeared. He fell from the sky. Fortunately, the stag had already stopped when he was hit in the face. Otherwise, under the inertia, he would have been half dead from the fall. Around the corner, Dake waved his hand, and the two glowing shadows drilled back into the magic card between his fingers. It was a simple encounter. He shouldn't have been exposed, right? He cast a glance at the hero child, whose butt had almost cracked from the fall. Dake came out from another fork in the road. With White on his back, he picked up the black top hat on the ground and blew on it. When the dust was gone, he gracefully put it back on. Then, he ignored White and quickly went back to the small temple. Since the seafood of the church had left, and White had been eliminated as an unstable factor, if he didn't take this opportunity to study the temple, wouldn't it be a waste of Professor Kazayer's gift? Dake wasn't interested in the purpose of the church. He came purely for the origin of the flower cards. Now the situation was very obvious. The statue of the goddess in the temple was the origin of the flower cards. As Dake stepped in, the extinguished torches lit up again and illuminated every corner of the temple. Dake summoned the little devil beast and let it fly around the temple to make sure that no one was hiding. He walked to the front of the statue and carefully observed the statue of the goddess that gave people the initial impression of holiness. It clasped its hands in front of its chest, closed its eyes and nodded slightly, like a pure girl praying in a church. Its body emitted a soft halo that made people feel very comfortable. Dake wasn't simply attracted to the statue like White. He carefully observed for a moment and preliminarily judged that it should be a goddess. The power of the flower cards originates from here. Is the reason why the bliss was reduced because it was purified by the holy power. In order to verify his guess, Dake took out Bliss Eye. But the moment he injected a trace of magic, Bliss Eye, and the statue exploded with an extremely strong light at the same time. Dake suddenly closed his eyes, and a Bliss +1 quickly floated in his dark vision. This made him instantly alert, and he immediately stopped injecting magic into Bliss Eye. Damn! It's the same power. Dake's face changed as he suddenly realized. Under the holy appearance of the statue, there was a sin of bliss that was even stronger than his current state. It turned out that the reason why bliss could be reduced by the flower cards was not because it was purified, but because it was absorbed. This moment, with Bliss Eye as a medium, the bliss accumulated in the statue was actually flowing backward into his body. This was like water flowing downwards. It had to reach a balance before it could stop. Fortunately, Bliss Eye was only Bliss Eye. It was too small and weak as a transmission channel for energy, so it was only Bliss +1 at the moment. It was just that the channel was already connected. Even if the magic input was cut off, it couldn't be closed. At the critical moment, Dake took out Pride Eye. 6 seconds later, the little devil beast's eyes changed. Dake threw Bliss Eye into the sky without hesitation. The little devil beast that had been unhappy with this magic card for a long time immediately flapped its wings and shot 3 shark-headed syringes at the pink card in a triangular formation, shooting it into pieces. Ha 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 ha! The little devil beast's wild laughter echoed in the temple. I'm a little devil beast, born noble. How dare you, a mere magic card, provoke me? If you provoke me again in the future, you'll end up like this. Oh, hee hee hee. Phew. With the shattering of Bliss Eye, the connection between Dake and the statue was finally broken. He breathed a sigh of relief, but his gaze towards the statue became more and more solemn. How could there be such a thing in the Shang-Malian secret chamber? Professor Kazair might know about it. What is he thinking? It can't be that you want me to destroy this thing, right? Who is the goddess that this statue symbolizes? One question after another kept popping up. Dake turned Pride Eye in his hand and fell into a short contemplation. A very normal thought naturally appeared in his mind. Can I use this goddess statue to create a higher level bliss series? Chapter 69. There were so many extreme bliss stored in the statue. If he could draw them all out, not to mention Extreme Bliss I, and Extreme Bliss 2, even Extreme Bliss 3 and Extreme Bliss V were highly possible. The only problem was that it seemed to lack a bit of flavor. Dake had a preliminary understanding of the bliss contained in the statue through the connection just now. He felt like it was missing something, but he couldn't put his finger on it. It could be a difference in quality, or it could be that something was missing. In short, it was slightly different from Dake's own bliss. This might be the reason why the bliss of the statue could be used to make flower cards. I still don't have enough knowledge. Dake couldn't help but sigh. Learning wasn't something that could be done overnight. Knowledge needed time to accumulate. He couldn't rush it. Website. https://vipcanchu. IP tomorrow. I'll come again tomorrow night. After making up his mind, Dake didn't stay in the temple for too long. He felt like he still needed to find Professor Kazair to borrow the thinking bottle. It was much faster to come out of the secret passage than to go in. The main thing was that Dake found White, who was limping while covering his butt, and followed him to take a shortcut. When they came out of the secret passage, it was close to midnight. Dake quickly parted ways with White and returned to the aristocrat's tower before the curfew. All in all, this night trip was quite smooth. Even though he lost a flower card and a bliss eye, there were more bliss series waiting for him. Therefore, Dark was able to sleep quite well. In contrast, White didn't sleep well. He finally made it back to the dormitory before the Knights Academy's tower was locked. His butt cracked further because he forced himself to run. It was one disaster after another. But when he thought of the gentleman in the black suit he encountered in the secret passage, this pain was nothing. He didn't look like someone from the church. He probably entered for other reasons like me. Damn it, who is it? I wanted to catch him and interrogate him, hiss. So White slept on his stomach the whole night. A warm breeze blew through the door. As the sunlight shone in, the catgrass, which was especially sensitive to sunlight, opened its eyes before Dake did. When Dake woke up, he realized that his face was wet. He reluctantly put the catnip plant back into the basket on the bedside table and got up to wash up. "You're in good spirits." Dake looked at himself in the mirror and summoned trash slime to apply on his face. Instantly he felt refreshed. Today's great sage daily had a different wind blowing over it. Dake was sitting alone in the common room, reading the newspaper. The banner of the newspaper was highlighted by colored pages, and there was a picture of the three princesses. However, in the end, less than a third of the students bought them. Of course, Dake bought them. His credits increased at a rate visible to the naked eye. Whether it was helping Luo boat or the multiplication table, they all gave him a lot of credits. The most important thing was that the summoning cards were really useful. He found that he could shorten his normal summoning spells to less than 6 seconds. Although he had just started learning sacrificial summoning, he learned it quickly. Last night's battle with White made him realize the importance of summoning. Every second counted in a battle between mages. Only by reducing the casting time and cooldown of summoning to the limit could one not be at a disadvantage. After class, Dake took a deep breath and went to Professor Kazair's office again. He did not mention what happened last night. Instead, he borrowed a thinking bottle from the professor. When the professor casually asked him about it, he smiled and said that he had made progress in his experiment and that the thinking bottle was more convenient. Professor Kazair gave him a few words of encouragement and went back to marking his homework. The two of them did not talk about the flower cards again. After leaving the office, Dake went to the cafeteria to eat. Then, he went back to his dorm and took the magic brain dropper and various instruments to the secret passage. In the daytime. Chapter 70. There was a question that had been lingering in Dake's mind. Why did he have to choose to enter the secret passage at night? Was it not good during the day? There were clearly many benefits during the day. 1. There were no golems patrolling. 2. The professors were all busy. 3. It was bright. There were no classes on Wednesday afternoon. Dake took a slight detour and entered the secret passage without anyone noticing. Then, following the route he took last night, he found the location of the temple in just over 10 minutes. As expected, he remembered the website, Vipkanshu. But there was no one in the temple. Whether it was that inexplicable church or White with a blossoming butt, they did not understand the benefits of the day. Dark had the little fiend magical beast stand guard outside, while he summoned little Ivan and began to harvest the bliss. The most important part of this step was how to draw out bliss. Might be difficult for others, but for Dake, just by injecting a little magic power, he could draw out the bliss accumulated in the goddess statue. Then, he could use the magic brain dropper to draw out a tube's worth. It was too easy. It was so easy that Dake almost thought he was dreaming. The thinking bottle borrowed from the professor could store a full 30 drops. Dake quickly filled up the thinking bottle and finally sucked a drop into the magic brain dropper before he left the small temple. But he didn't notice. After he left, fine cracks slowly crawled on the goddess statue's white jade-like skin. At 3:30 in the afternoon, Dake had already returned to the dormitory. He spread out the experimental equipment, placed the thinking bottle in the upper left corner, and placed the magic brain dropper on the shelf with the tip of his mouth facing up. Then, he washed his hands and couldn't wait to start the experiment. He already had some experience in the making of the Big Sin series of magic cards. Basically, he was making it according to the precision-making method of the emotion card. First, he boiled the brain juice, and then made the sealing fluid. Then, he took a blank magic card and spread it on the experiment table. Then, he spread the egg white brain juice evenly on the blank magic card to change the surface properties of the magic card so that emotions and other thoughts could be more easily attached to it. And then, Dake took the magical brain pipette and pressed the tip of the magical brain pipette against the blank magic card, squeezing the magical brain with all his might. The drop of bliss, stored in the demon brain, was spat out. The effect of the brain juice came into play. Bliss was like a drop of paint on a piece of white paper, instantly dyeing it red. Different from Pride's dark gold color, Bliss's color was an ambiguous pink, but it was very light. The experiment ended here. Dake finally discovered the problem. That's not right. I remember when I was making the Pride magic card, a single drop of Pride was enough to turn the blank magic card into a rich dark gold color. Could it be that one drop is not enough because of the quality? With a hint of doubt, Dake extracted a drop of bliss from the thinking bottle and dripped it onto the card again. The pink color on the card had finally deepened a little, but it still couldn't compare to the Bliss Eye card that had been modified from a flower card. It wasn't until the third drop of bliss that the color of the card became very similar to Bliss Eye. Dake recorded this phenomenon and began to apply the sealing liquid. After more than 10 minutes, a Bliss series of magic cards was finally completed. Dake held the card and observed it carefully for a while. Perhaps it was because of the experiment process, but he always felt that this thing wasn't very reliable. Let's give it a try first. Then, he turned his gaze to the little devil beast that was pretending to be asleep on the bird rack. The experiment showed that the effect of this magic card was still there. Although the duration was slightly inferior to that flower card, the degree of emotional impact was not much different. Then, he did a simple calculation problem. A Bliss Eye card used 3 drops of bliss. Wouldn't Bliss 2 need 9 drops? What about Bliss 3? 30 drops. Considering that if he continued to make Bliss 2, it was very likely that the Bliss 3 needed for Bliss 3 would not be enough, Dake made a decision. He skipped Bliss 2 and tried to make Bliss 3. There are 28 drops left. Hope it's enough. At this point, Dake didn't have much hope for the bliss produced by the goddess statue. He only hoped that this experiment could provide experience for the subsequent Pride 3. However, he still took out one of the 250 credit blank magic cards and began to make it carefully. The steps of making it were roughly the same as before. However, when he injected bliss, he used a total of 28 drops of bliss. That's right, he injected all the remaining bliss he had. In the end, this 50-credit blank magic card was dyed a flirtatious golden pink from the inside out. It had a strong, frivolous aura. He maintained his composure and continued to make it. He applied the sealing liquid and drew the alchemy circle. A total of 7 alchemy circles were completed in one go. When the last alchemy circle was successfully triggered, even Dake himself felt that it was unbelievable. This Bliss 3 seemed to have been made just like that. Just from the outside, this Bliss 3 didn't seem to be much different from Bliss I. It was just that the color gave people a more enchanting feeling, and there was a strong but not greasy fragrance. However, nothing could be evaluated just from the outside. If he wanted to know what was inside, he could only experiment. Dake couldn't help but look at the little fiend beast again. "No way, sir." Again. The little fiend beast that had just recovered from its bliss state suddenly felt like it had fallen into an abyss. Meow, meow, meow. The cat leaned on the balcony window and peeked in. The little fiend beast thought that this cute cry was a malicious taunt. It stretched out its claws and lay down like a corpse. "Come on. I'm yours." Life was like being targeted by a crazy woman. Since it couldn't resist, it had to learn to enjoy it. The little devil beast had been with Dark for so long, and it could be said that it had learned this famous saying. Dake shook his head helplessly. The little fiend beast was indeed a little pitiful. All this time he was really sorry. However, the experiment still had to be done. "Who asked you to be the most resistant to a type of plant?" Dake took a deep breath and held the Bliss 3 magic card with his index and middle fingers. He swiped it lightly in front of him and activated this summoning spell. In the name of Dake Dimming Magic Summoning. In an instant, an extremely strong pink light burst out from the Bliss 3 magic card. Almost the entire dormitory was illuminated in the girl's color. Other than the caster who was not affected, the cat grass outside the window was meowing softly. As for the little fiend beast that was directly exposed to the strong light. Chapter 71. The little demon beast lying on the bed suddenly let out an extremely shrill scream. It was as if the pink light turned into countless sharp blades, piercing its body over and over again. But this kind of acting could no longer fool Dake. He watched as the light gathered between the little demon beast's eyebrows, and the skull pattern on its forehead was replaced by a new Great Sin emblem. The pink light released from Bliss 3 was completely absorbed and then exploded. With the emblem as the core, its entire body turned into light, and finally formed a pink light body. Then the life structure of the light body unbelievably underwent a drastic change. It was like a tadpole transforming into a toad, or a marine creature transforming into a land creature. It was a transition of life form, a great evolution of species. Dake almost immediately realized that this was evolution. The little demon beast, under the effect of Bliss 3, actually evolved. Bliss 3 was like a huge data card for the digitalized beast, which was supposed to be a life form of data. 1 second to remember. https:// Vipkanchu. Endless ecstasy filled his heart. Dake looked at the +1 notification floating in front of his eyes, but he didn't care at all. He only desired this form, and was sincerely excited about the little demon beast's evolution. What could it be? Demon beast. Evil dragon. Evil ice beast. There were too many evolution paths for digitalized beasts. Especially digitalized beasts like the little demon beast. Its evolution path was designed with a large number of virus-type digitalized beasts. Dake's understanding of this was only on the surface. However, this brought him even more pleasure. Everyone liked evolution. Whether it was the demon beast, the evil dragon, or the evil ice beast, they were all powerful and handsome mature digitalized beasts. Although their evil appearance might attract criticism, the magisters who used the dark card set and the demon card set weren't useless. There was nothing to worry about, as long as they pursued the extreme handsomeness. Come out. It's decided to be you. Evil. Black Dirk Beast. He looked at the black cat that was still rolling on the bed. Dake's mouth froze. How should he put it? A Heidi Road beast is not impossible. She had jet black fur, large cat ears, exquisite facial features, a petite and cute body, a meatball wearing claw gloves, and a long, slender tail. She looked just like a black-skinned hot girl. She could barely do it. Meow! The Heidi Road beast stopped rolling. As her long eyelashes trembled slightly, her amber-yellow cat eyes slowly opened. He was like a newborn baby, looking at the world with curiosity. Then, its gaze focused on Dake at a speed visible to the naked eye. Meow! Master Tidy Tidy! The Heidi Road beast's eyes suddenly turned into the shape of a heart. Its pink tongue licked the corner of its mouth, making its lips moist and elastic. The great sin emblem on its forehead constantly released a pink aura as its emotions changed. Dake really wanted to know the difference between Elysium and pride. But the Heidi Road beast pounced over with a meow, and its powerful strength instantly pressed him to the ground. Looking at the Heidi Road beast's eyes, which were filled with a dense, bewitching fog, Dark realized that something was wrong. Get up! The Heidi Road beast did not listen to the order. In the name of Dake Dimming, I order you to stand up, my familiar. The great sin emblem between the Heidi Road beast's eyebrows flashed, as if to counteract the mandatory order from the familiar system. And it stuck out its pink tongue, starting from Dake's chin, and licked his forehead. Is this out of control? Dake's face was full of saliva, and he showed a complicated expression. It was not very obvious when Elysium I was used. It was completely obvious when Elysium 3 was used. The Great Sin series magic card, which originated from Elysium of the goddess statue, finally showed its biggest drawback: chaotic evolution, out-of-control digital beasts. It could not help but remind people of the horror when the protagonist Tai's sub-ancient beast mistakenly evolved into a Tyrannosaurus in the first Digimon. That's it. Dake finally found his self-control. It seemed that evolving into a Heidi Road beast was really too lucky. If it was a demonic beast or something like that, he would have been torn to pieces by now. Thinking of this, Dake's heart chilled, and his eyes looking at the Heidi Road beast became much gentler. He turned around and hugged it, and skillfully rubbed its chin, ears, chest, belly and forehead. Anyway, it was just stroking a cat. He was already very skilled. Under the effect of Dake's eagle hand, the overbearing Heidi Road beast suddenly became a creature that was even worse than an ordinary kitten. It was addicted to Elysium, and could not extricate itself. Dake's full strength made it sublime in the extreme. As the Heidi Road beast finally stopped moving, Dake communicated with it and quickly recorded in his notebook. Card name, Heidi Road Beast. Type, Elf card. Level. Race, Bird Beast. Attribute, Dark. Magic, 1500. Attack, 1900. Defense, 900. Killing skills, Cat Fist, Dangerous Love. The black fur was impressive. It was a virus-type Heidi Road beast. It was a completely evil woman. It ran and lived in the creepy darkness. The Heidi Road beast was born with a bad personality. It had strong self-esteem and liked to bully the weak. It was a troublesome digital beast. It was basically a dark attribute digital beast that evolved into a fallen angel-type digital beast. Its killing skill was the same as the Heidi Road beast's. Cat Fist. Cat Fist. Wave its claws and tear the enemy apart. Dangerous Love. Use dangerous charm to confuse the enemy and control their actions. If it's a magic elf card, it's a blue card with 2 skills, and it's a powerful combination of an attack skill and a control skill. Dangerous Love. The description is very similar to White's Forbidden Love. Next, record the coat of arms. Dake quickly drew the coat of arms of Bliss. Different from Pride, Bliss' coat of arms was green. In the middle of the coat of arms was a strange mark. On top of the mark was an astronomical symbol that represented the moon. The outer circle of the coat of arms was English, level 666 system, Asmodeus code. Lust below the seal, in the inner circle of the coat of arms, it was written, Caution, Purgatory level 7. After Dake drew the whole coat of arms, he translated it. Outer circle frowny face level, 666. System, Asmodeus. Code, Bliss, inner circle frowny face warning. Purgatory level, 7. Lucifer Asmodeus. I see these are the names of the 7 sins demon gods. The bliss demon god is the 7th in purgatory. Chapter 72. The evolution lasted for about 16 minutes. As the bliss emblem on the black road beast's forehead gradually faded, it degenerated into a small demonic beast in the light. Even though this was within his expectations, Dake was still a little disappointed. After degenerating, the little devil beast woke up in an instant and struggled to escape from Dake's embrace. It flew back to its bird stand and faced Dake with the back of its head. Dake could faintly hear it muttering, "The little devil beast has lost its dignity. The little devil beast wants to die. Where is hell?" Hell was empty. The devil was in the human world. Dake grinned and summoned the trash slime to help him clean up the remnants of the experiment. About an hour and a half later, the CD of Bliss 3 was refreshed. It seemed that other than the drawback of losing control, this Bliss 3 magic card was more complete in other aspects. Of course, the 50-credit blank magic card was also very important. Dake was not in a hurry to carry out the second experiment. Instead, he first finished the takeout brought by the little devil beast before starting the last step of the night. Website: https://vipcanchu. Vape. The little devil beast's unexpected evolution made him have great expectations for little Ibu. Like the digital beast, the sprite was also a species that could evolve, even though the evolution principle was completely different. Since the bliss emblem had the symbol of the moon, perhaps it was the same as pride, which symbolized the power of the sun, and also had the power of the moon. And a life like Ibu could bathe in the moonlight and evolve into Moon Ibu. Magic summoning. Under the little devil beast's gloating gaze, Dake took out Fantasy Beast Ibu and summoned Ibu. Ibu. Then, swipe card. Evolve. Vijim. This time it had really evolved. Under the illumination of Bliss 3, the Bliss emblem also appeared on Ibu's forehead. Moonlight with a trace of pink mist was released from its forehead, enveloping its petite body. Ibu Moon Ibu. Different from the original Moon Ibu, this Moon Ibu's pitch-black fur had a pink ring-shaped pattern on it. Black represented the night. Pink represented bliss. It was the agent of the moon that walked in the night, a charming spirit that symbolized bliss. Card name: Moon Ivan. Type: Elf card. Race: Bird. Attribute: Evil magic power, 1500 attack, 1600 defense, 1900 ultimate skills, Moonlight, Evil Wave, Shadow Ball. 3 skills. After evolving, Ivan had shockingly become a 4-star orange card. Moreover, it was an extremely rare orange card with a self-recovery skill. As everyone knew, the biggest problem with the magic elf card was its lack of endurance. Mana was both the lifeline and the energy source of the magic elf. Casting skills consumed mana, and standing still also consumed mana. Without the support of an archmage, a 1500 mana value 4-star magic guide fairy could only exist for about 30 minutes without being able to use any skills. However, a magic guide fairy without a sure kill skill was equivalent to losing its soul. Therefore, a magister would usually equip a deck with some rechargeable cards. And a magic guide fairy with a self-recovery skill could perfectly solve this problem. Moon Ivan's first skill, Moonlight, was a very powerful recovery skill. Moonlight recovers 1/4 of maximum mana. Under the illumination of moonlight, it can recover 1/2 of maximum mana in one go, and provide 4 points of mana per second. Apart from that, the area of effect skill Evil Wave and the single target skill Shadow Ball greatly increased Moon Ivan's versatility. And the most ridiculous thing about it was its full 1900 defense value. Compared to the Black Dirk Beast, which was second to none in terms of attack, Moon Ivan's attack was slightly weaker, but its defense was undoubtedly at the top. Attack could be made up for with skills, but defense was a hard indicator. Compared to the Black Dirk Beast with 1900 attack and 900 defense, Moon Ivan's strength was obvious. But before Dake could rejoice, Moon Ivan threw him to the ground. The Ivan family, which had both cat and fox characteristics, was never stingy with their tongues. But Dake already had experience in dealing with the Black Dirk Beast, and it turned into its own shape in a few moves. Perhaps I should make another Bliss 3, and enjoy the feeling of having two beauties in each hand? This thought suddenly flashed across his mind. But Dake quickly shook his head. The flaw of Bliss 3 was very obvious. The bliss produced by the goddess statue was absolutely different from his own bliss. There was not much research value. The core purpose of Dake's frequent experiments and the creation of the Great Sin series of magic guide cards was still to analyze the great sins. The increase in ability was just a side benefit. It was not advisable to put the cart before the horse. As such, there was no need to go to that temple anymore. As for the flower cards, it might be more feasible to collect the finished products. The night turned. Just as Dake Dimming was calming himself down, there were desperate cries coming from the temple. How did this happen? 1 whole month of hard work. More than 10 members of the so-called cult wearing black robes and masks were kneeling in front of the goddess statue, crying hysterically, "Goddess, please forgive us." The goddess statue that had no reaction to Dake's crazy blasphemy actually trembled slightly and slowly opened a slit. She was born from the moon and descended on the earth. She was the goddess of the moon and also the mother goddess of the earth. The night was her eyes, and the day was the time of her sleep. Dake did not know that by choosing the day, he had accidentally avoided a misfortune. After accepting the sacrifice of the cult, the goddess statue opened a slit. Her eyes were flowing with gentleness like water. But there was a layer of mist covering it, making it sacred and awe-inspiring and not to be looked at directly. It was just that there was a hideous crack on her delicate cheek, destroying her perfect temperament. The members of the cult prostrated themselves on the ground, trembling all over. But no one noticed that the eyes of the goddess statue had quietly opened a slit. The cult had been established for almost a year, but this was the first time that such a mistake had been made. No one knew why the goddess statue, which was about to be repaired, cracked again. When everyone was kneeling and praying, the light pink mist seeped out from the goddess statue into their bodies, increasing some of their thoughts and making them lose their minds. The goddess' voice rang in their ears. It was a little hazy but more mysterious. The leader of the cult seemed to have felt the goddess' forgiveness. He kowtowed and cried bitterly, "The great goddess of the moon, please continue to guide us forward. The path illuminated by the moonlight is the path that we crawl on, for the goddess." You're tuning in to the Whispers of Romance YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.